And
Okay.
Adrienne,
Yes.
just one other direction. Did you get, open it up on your end? Because I can't see the notes. So if there's anything really valuable in the notes that you can kind of, chime in with a few points if you want to. Otherwise, I'll just go through my memory and such.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Tony.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another social emotional workshop. And today we will be dealing with the subject of domestic violence and healthy relationships. Today we have Joe and Adriana with us to give the presentation. Welcome back, you guys. Adrienne, your first time, and welcome back, Joe. We're so happy to have you.
Great. Thank you, Tony.
Very nice to be here.
Just a short introduction. Christina usually does these. I am a community health educator for CARE. I've been teaching parenting classes for 12 years. I also do one-time presentations on the topics of drug prevention, from alcohol to tobacco to prescription drugs, protective and risk factors, and any of those type of topics. So I'm going to share my screen and get right into the topic today. And Adrienne, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself also?
Sure, thank you. My name's Adrienne. I work for CARE of Southeastern Michigan. I'm a community organizer, which means that I work in Macomb County, helping to build substance abuse prevention coalitions. And I work with Mary Jo Harris, who is working to build a substance abuse prevention coalition in the Grosse Pointe and Harper Woods area. So if any of you are interested in getting hooked up with her, want to find out more about that coalition and are from that area or work in Harper Woods, we'd love to have you do that.
Great. Okay, healthy relationships. We are going to talk about some really touchy topics, some really important topics. This is the relationship spectrum. So we're going to go all the way from healthy relationships and continue on the spectrum to the abusive relationship and the things in between. So I am going to start off with the abusive relationship and work backwards. So the first thing I'd like to talk about are the warning signs of abusive relationships, some types of abuse, the wheel of control, and male privilege. So some warning signs of an abusive relationship. Past abusive relationships, so if the person tells you stories that he or she hit somebody or punched somebody in a relationship, so you meet somebody and they tell you a story that what they did in their relationship, well, that is a big red flag. Or they deny some of the abuse, like somebody says, I heard the story, oh no, that didn't happen. So either sharing the past abusive relationships or denying the past abusive relationships. Somebody that's controlling of somebody else's behavior. So they're controlling either dress or where they're going, who their friends are. And we'll talk a lot more into these warning signs as we go along. The person isolates you. So keeps you away from your friends or your family. Threats of violence or use of force. That is when they will verbally threaten you or physically threaten you. Also, maybe, if you're against the wall, they'll punch the wall next to your head kind of thing. So showing that force in that relationship. Unrealistic expectations. So if a person's like, oh, you're my whole world, I don't know what I would do without you, you're everything to me. No one person could fill those expectations in a relationship. So if that person is telling you that you are everything in that relationship, nobody can fill that. So that's a red flag of being that person's everything. Extreme jealousy. I know sometimes some jealousy seems romantic and things, but jealousy is really, really not healthy. So jealousy just shows this, they can't kind of do without you and that you have to fill that love for them. So jealousy is really never healthy. I mean, a little jealousy of, I'm jealous of your old boyfriend thing. Some levels of jealousy may be appropriate, but usually jealousy is a bad place. and engages in manipulative parenting. So if you do have children, that you will kind of fill your child's head with false information, use the kids to manipulate you, um, use the kids as a weapon. If you're threatening something, I'm going to take the kids away. So you use that manipulative parenting behavior. So I'll tell you a quick story about the progression. I was in a webinar, and this one person told the story. This female told the story. And she says, in high school, they met. And this is kind of the progression of an abusive relationship, that you think it's wonderful in the beginning, but then it escalates. So you meet in high school and everything's wonderful. And they're each of their worlds, you know, you spend all the time together, things are great, you love each other, 24 hours, 7 days a week, you text each other all the time, you stay up to 2, 3, 4 in the morning texting each other. Now, in the beginning, that sounds all wonderful. Like, this guy really loves me. He cares about me. But then he starts controlling the behavior. So he's kind of controlling who your friends are, maybe what you're wearing and things. Usually the female's family might get a little arguments about the person she's dating. So then she kind of attaches onto the boyfriend a little more strongly, and the fighting of the family continues. Then the next is, hey, we can leave your family and we get an apartment together. So they get an apartment together and things are wonderful. He's loving and caring, and it's 24/7. But then as they're living in the apartment and maybe going to school or college or something like that, then he starts controlling that behavior. Where are you going? Don't wear that. I don't like you wearing that. I don't like you seeing your family. I don't like you seeing your friends. So then that's where that isolation starts. And then maybe some threats of violence, or maybe a hit comes in, or that fear comes in. And then that unrealistic expectations is that you have to be his all. And it just escalates. Next, maybe a baby. So if he feels like he's losing you, maybe he'll get you pregnant. And now you have that baby with him, so now you're kind of stuck. And now he uses that parenting relationship with the children for more manipulation. Something else the male might do to control the female is give them a sexual transmitted disease. Because now it's like, who's going to love you with that disease that you have now? You know, you can't get anybody else but me. So that's that progression of 24/7 I love yous, to texting at 4 in the morning, to isolating them from their family, to living together, and then the progression. And that's that slippery slope. So seeing these red flags in the beginning is really important. Some types of abuse. Physical abuse, you know, that's any yanking, twisting, pushing, flicking, hitting, any type of physical abuse. And even like I mentioned before, maybe punching the wall next to the person's head. It's kind of physical and a little emotional, because you're putting that emotional fear into that person. And there's emotional abuse, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So we'll skip over that one and get to that a little bit later. Verbal abuse is any demeaning, criticizing, putting down, calling names. Sexual abuse is, I think it was till 1993. I don't know if I have the date right, where if you were married, you couldn't be raped by your husband because you're married. But now they have laws on there. It doesn't matter if you're married. It doesn't matter if you're boyfriend and girlfriend. It doesn't matter what that relationship is. You need consent. And we're going to talk about consent towards the end of the training. But sexual abuse is anything of forced sexual activity. Financial abuse, that is controlling their finances, either taking their check, maybe giving them an allowance or something, or you don't let them work and earn their own money. That way they're dependent on you. So you're controlling their behavior, you're controlling their world through those financial restrictions. Also stalking. So it could be stalking either through the digital form on the phones or just following them and stalking them and wanting to know where they're going and spying on them. Does that sound loving to a teenager? They love you so much, they just want to make sure you're safe. No, that is a red flag. And then the digital abuse, we'll talk about that in a couple slides here. And anytime through this training, I don't want to lecture for the whole hour. If somebody wants to, share an example or a situation they might share that could really connect some of these dots and make it real for the people listening to this training. So this is that emotional abuse. If you've heard of gaslighting, this was a movie back in 1944 where this gentleman here was trying to make his wife crazy so he can get the inheritance of the house and the money and the jewelry. So gaslighting is telling lies and exaggerations or trivializing really big things like, oh, you're worried about that little thing? Wow, why are you so crazy? What are you doing about that? So you're trivializing some really big things that are happening. Or they deny, even if you have proof, you saw them, you have pictures, you have text messages, you have all of this information, and they still denying it, thinking you're crazy. So you have proof, and they totally deny it, thinking that you don't know what you're talking about. Or their actions don't match their words. So they say they love you, but everything they do is the opposite of love. They say they love you, but then they manipulate you. They say they love you, then they hurt you. So the words and their actions don't match. And when you're being gaslit, it's really confusing. You don't know what's right and what's wrong. They isolate you, so they will turn your friends against you and tell stories about you. So now the only person that you can go to is that person who's gaslighting you. And then they will be there for you. They will hold you and love you and tell you it's going to be okay. But then in the next breath, they're using confusion and denial and exaggeration and lies. They assemble that team against you, like your friends or your family will be assembled against you. Like, I don't know what's going on with her, and she's this and she's that, where now they're thinking that you are out of your wits and you're confused or you're crazy. So then who do you go to? You go to that person for nurturing, for help, for comfort, and then they do that. They tell everyone else that everybody else is lying and they're not. So some signs of being gaslit are you always apologizing? I'm sorry, maybe I was wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. I apologize. Or making excuses for their partner's behavior. So they're like, well, he had a bad day. He's really stressed out at work. That's why he did this. He's really a great person. So you kind of make these excuses for him. Constantly second guessing yourself. Did I say that? Was it really my fault? Am I overreacting? I don't know. So you're constantly second guessing yourself because you don't know what's real and what's false. You don't know reality anymore because you're so confused because of that manipulation. And that feeling crazy. And that's what they try to do in that movie, gaslighting, was making that person feel crazy so they can be committed, so they could take the house and the inheritance and such. But gaslighting doesn't mean proving you're crazy to take your stuff like the movie. It just means that they can manipulate you and have that power over you. And the next is this is that texting, the digital abuse. So it tells a partner who they can be friends with, who they can follow on social media. They'll send insulting or threatening text messages, or constantly texting their partner so they can never be away from their phone. So if they text you and you didn't respond to their text right away, where were you? How come you didn't respond? Who were you with? Who were you talking to? Why was your phone off? So they constantly text you and you feel that you can't walk away from your phone. I know when I was learning about some digital do's and don'ts, they said, never text somebody immediately after they text you. And this is just my perception and what I've heard through some trainings. Now, if it's an answer, where are you? Of course, hey, I'm on my way. But if somebody texts you, just a conversation or something, that don't immediately text them. Because if they get used to you immediately texting them within that 10 seconds, 30 seconds, they get used to that immediate response. And then when you don't respond, now they think, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why didn't you text me? It's like, hey, I'll text you. I'll text you an hour after you texted me. Sometimes I'll get a text and I want to reply, but I'm like, all right, I'll reply in a little bit. And then maybe I'll forget and I'll text them maybe 2 hours later. Sometimes I forget and I text them the next day. And they're like, Joe, I never know when you're going to respond to my text. I'm like, I know. Sometimes I put my phone down and I don't respond. And that's not a bad thing to do, because when youth feel like they should get an on the spot response, they get used to that. And that is really kind of controlling. And if I don't give you that on the spot response, then something's wrong with the relationship, maybe? Not really. Does anybody have an opinion on that? Texting right away or waiting for an hour to go by?
Help myself. I got a text right away. I
All
gotta
right,
send a
text right away. That's okay.
It's one of those things. If I don't do it now, I'm gonna forget. So I'm not sure I can do that.
Now, if it's important or something like that, yeah, you might want to text right away. But if it's just, a text, say, hey, how you doing? Well, I'll tell them how I'm doing and in good time, if I remember. Anybody else have an opinion on texting right away?
I'm a right away texter, and when I don't respond, it's like I get 3 or 4 other texts. Are you okay? What's wrong? Where are you?
Okay.
So I get your point.
Yeah. So as adults, we can kind of rationalize that, but think of youth that is a right away texter, and then you don't text me right away. What is that youth? Hey, where you at? How come you're not responding? What's going on? So it kind of adds a little level of confusion to that relationship. All right, interesting. I just wanted to know your points of view on that.
I am not a texter. I do not text back right away. My kids actually know as adults to text my husband rather than me, that they're more
Okay.
likely to get an answer. But honestly, as you're talking, if it is my children, even though they're adult children and don't live with me, if they don't text me back right away, I'm worried, because they do text me back most of the time right away. If it's another adult, it doesn't bother me if I don't get a text back right away.
Okay, I feel that. That makes sense. And let's look at healthy relationships. In a healthy relationship, I can text you back right away or wait an hour or forget and text you the next day. And it doesn't do anything to the relationship. But if you have some of those red flags going on in that relationship, if that person really demands you to text them right away, it's kind of like this part right here, where that partner can't be away from their phone and you need to text me right away. That's when that you should say that's a red flag, and I'm going to wait an hour before I text them back. And if they get angry, well, that's a red flag, because now they're angry and controlling, that I have to be at their snap of a finger. The next one, demands partner send explicit pictures, or they're sending them unwanted explicit pictures of themselves. Another red flag of digital abuse. Steals or insists to be given the passwords to your phone. So if your boyfriend is insisting on getting your passwords to your social media, or they steal your phone, they look through your phone on occasions, definitely red flags. So this is the power and control wheel. The inside of this wheel are some behaviors of power and control. And then the outside of this wheel is the physical and sexual violence that will result from these behaviors growing and growing. Now, when I went to Macomb Community College, I know they have these posted up in their bathrooms. So there's a lot of schools or some workplaces that might have this wheel posted right in the bathroom. So it brings an awareness to sexual and physical violence in relationships. So you can see the things we're talking about, using intimidation by making her afraid, by using looks or actions or gestures, smashing things. That's that punching the wall next to her head to use that intimidation for control. Using emotional abuse, like we talked about, putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, making her feel guilty. It's just all that emotional manipulation. Using isolation, it's controlling the shoes she wears, the dresses, the everything she wears or everything she does. Jealousy, minimizing and denying blame. So making light of the abuse and not taking her concerns seriously. Oh, that was nothing. What are you worried about? Just minimizing. That only happened once. It's never happened again. Don't be so worried about such a small thing. So you're kind of minimizing and blaming others. If it, the blame about, well, you made me do this. If you wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have gotten so angry. Using the children, I explained that one about using the children to feel guilty or using them to threaten to take them away and such. Male privilege, treating her like a servant, like that 40s and 50s of the male privilege is that women have their place, they should stay home and be homemakers, and I'm the male, I am the master of the house, I am the hierarchy, and that male privilege is that power and control. Using economic abuse, we talked about in that PowerPoint, the earlier slide, preventing her from keeping a job or getting a job, even sabotaging interview or something, so she won't get a job, so she'll be dependent on you and your finances. And using coercion to and threats. So this would be a good idea to have this wheel, and you can go on Google and just put this power and control wheel and print out a PDF and just post it up in the restrooms or break areas and stuff, just to bring an awareness. Sometimes people hear this information and they don't realize that some of these things in this wheel is a red flag because they've never really seen a healthy relationship. So it might seem like love. If that's all I've seen my whole life, if all I've seen is my father yelling and screaming, or my mother yelling and screaming, or my mother being hit or something, that's love, right? So people might not know what a healthy relationship is. All right, so that is the really scary one. So now let's go into the kind of unhealthy. It's not abusive, but it's on the border of being unhealthy. And we're going to talk about the signs in the blame and then the codependency. So some warning signs of an unhealthy relationship. So pressuring and controlling. So it might not be at that level of the abusive, but when you see those early red flags about pressuring them to do things they don't want to do, if you feel those butterflies and things in your stomach, like you really shouldn't do this, like peer pressure. You're going to go along. Well, this feels like it's controlling. I really don't want to do this, but you end up doing that. Dishonesty or breaking trust. So if that person is breaking your trust or lying, that's not a healthy relationship. I know a lot of people lie. You almost can say everyone lies, but in a relationship that should be built on trust, then if there is any of that falsity or lying about where they are or where they've been, then that is definitely that red flag. Unilateral decision making. So if you're in a relationship and you have no say in the decisions you make about the relationship, I'm talking even what movie to go see. What are you going to do this weekend? If there is a unilateral decision making, then that is a red flag. It's an unhealthy not to have your point of view heard. Not that you have to decide on my point of view, but I have to be able to be in the decision-making process and not be an object. Condescending or mean. So, and I don't know if teenagers do, I mean, they're sarcastic and they say joking things, but in a relationship, relationships that's supposed to be built on trust and love and respect, being condescending and mean, maybe around friends, you'll give a little put down or something as a joke. Well, that's an unhealthy relationship if they're being mean or condescending in any way. Disrespectful, so disrespecting your values, disrespecting your rights. The needy one is where they need you to fulfill something in them. I need you in my life. I don't know what I will do without you. So those are those unrealistic expectations that I explained in that that abusive relationship, where if that person is too needy in that relationship, that's unhealthy. Now, if we have the communication skills to deal with that and communicate and have a healthier relationship and grow from there, because not everybody's going to have the perfect relationship when we start dating. And if we can talk about that and have decision making and have trust and have meaning in communication, then we can improve that relationship. But if the person is too needy and you mention that and it escalates from there by being mean or condescending or ridiculing, that's unhealthy. And we really need to kind of put our barrier or blocker up or our barriers up, which I'll talk about in a moment. And a communication breakdown. It's really hard if we can't communicate. Communication is the foundation of all relationships. So if we're not communicating effectively or respectfully, that's going to be a really hard relationship to maintain. So we really need to know how to communicate in a healthy way. Maybe our parents never communicated in a healthy way. I know my parents were very high energy. My father was controlling and yelling and screaming, and he used a lot of demeaning things, but he never did physical abuse. But my mother was always the object in the family, or in the family. So in my eyes, it was like, all right, so is this a healthy relationship? But as you grow up, you know that's not a healthy relationship. But if you don't have the skills to kind of continue or change that cycle, then we're going to have to start talking about it or end that relationship and have somebody else that has more respect for you. Two questions down here. So with these warning signs, you have to ask yourself, is your self-esteem becoming affected? Are you kind of second guessing yourself, and is it lowering your self-esteem? Is one person unwilling to change? So whenever we're going to have a collaboration, maybe on a decision, is one person just really rigid and it's their way or nothing? Brene Brown does this. This is a video here. You can watch it on YouTube or on her website there. And it is blame is the inverse of accountability. And in this video, she has this cup of coffee and she drops it and it breaks everywhere and splashes all over her. And the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, "Darn it, Steve," which is her husband. So she blamed dropping the cup and making a mess on her husband. Because the first thing that comes into her mind is, this was my second cup of coffee. And if he came down earlier, I wouldn't have had a second cup of coffee. So it's his fault for me dropping this cup of coffee on myself. So blame is a way to kind of relieve pain from us. And we really need to change that. So when something happens to us and the first thing that comes to mind is blaming the other person, then that is really unhealthy. We need to take accountability for what we do, for our actions. And that really comes with empathy. If you have empathy, you're going to kind of filter your behavior through how it's going to make the other person feel. if I didn't have empathy, I'm going to be really quick to blame somebody else or to behave any way I want and not care about how the other person feels. And then if they feel bad, I can blame it on them for being overreactive or for being silly or for not understanding me and my needs. So we really need to take accountability in our relationships and not go off to blame the other person right away. And I'm curious, has anybody ever had a big oops and break something and then blame somebody else?
Well, in my relationships, I mean, I was in a long-term marriage, and it got to be a normal thing where, whenever something untoward happened, it was my behavior that caused the reaction. Whereas my response was, I can't even get you to really cook dinner most of the time. Why? How is it my fault that you just called me, out of my name or something like that? So I'm familiar with the behavior, and the point I always did try to make, if everything is my fault, then I must be in control, which I'm not, and I found a little introspection is the fact that if I blame somebody else for all my problems, I can never solve my own.
True. That's good.
It represents a perception of a loss of control, because the only person I really have any ability to manage is myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In relationships, once we start blaming the other person, that other person is going to start blaming us. Right. Now, everybody's behavior is because of the other person. Well, I did this because you did that.
Right.
Well, the reason I did that is because you did this.
I was reading this book on relationships, and the guy was a marriage therapist, and he said usually when two married people argue, it's a race to who's to define the biggest victim.
Yeah.
It's a contest for identifying the biggest victim in the situation. And his response was, in order to solve problems in a healthy relationship, each person has to take 100% of the responsibility for what's going on, not try to divide it. Each person is wholly responsible for the relationship and what goes on in it. Thought that made a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I heard this phrase that everybody lives in a 2-story house. Your story and
right.
Her story. Everybody lives in a 2-story house. So just because my perception is off doesn't mean I get to blame you for being, right. confused or misunderstood. We need that communication.
Right.
We need respect. Well, thank you
right.
for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's look at this a relationship, a codependent relationship or an independent relationship. So I like these letters here, A-frame. An A-frame is a dependent relationship, right? So back in the day, you hold me up, I hold you up, right? You scratch my back, I scratch your back. So we're leaning on each other. But just like the gentleman shared a little earlier, the perception. So one person might need more support than the other. And usually the person keeping score is usually the person losing. The person's keeping score of all the injustices that are happening, like, well, you did this and you did this. Well, if you're keeping score, that means you're losing in the relationship, in your perception, that is. So let's look at that A-frame. You support me, I support you. But usually it starts getting unbalanced and one person is leaning on the other person too much, a lot. Now this person is supporting the person on the top, leaning into this relationship. Now what happens when this person on the bottom leaves? That person just falls right over. So this A-frame is a dependent relationship. You're dependent on the other person to support you. When is it When is it ever perfectly supportive? Like, I support you, you support me, this is great, I do this for you, you do this for me, and it's a perfectly balanced A-frame. Does that ever happen? Maybe in a wonderfully perfect, healthy relationship. But usually when you're dependent on the other person to support you, it starts getting unsupported. So the A-frame is not the healthiest relationship. So we move to the H-frame. Now the H-frame is two individual vertical lines. So everybody is independent. So this line here is I take care of myself for you. And this line here is you take care of yourself for me. So we're standing opposite, and the line in between, the cross horizontal line, could be the communication. So that's more of a healthier relationship. And it's independent of support. I'm going to take care of me for you. And you take care of you for me. Because I'm not here to make you feel better, as in this dependent relationship. So we both have to be independent. Now, the interdependent, which means entering each other. So it has the forms of the H frame, where we stand independently on the outside vertical lines, but then we lean into the M frame, where we're going to connect in the middle. Now, that is the healthier relationship, where we're independent, but then we are interdependent at the same time. Now, the H frame, I say that's a healthy relationship too, as long as we keep this connection between the both of us, and we communicate and respect each other. So I just like those 3 letters describing those 3 types of relationships. Could anybody identify what kind of relationship they have? I mean, don't disclose it if you don't want to disclose it, but can you see yourselves in any of these relationships? So let's look at codependency characteristics. Codependency, you're constantly pleasing the other person. So you're neglecting your needs to please the other person. Extreme need for approval and recognition, fear of abandonment, being alone, fear of being trapped in a relationship, unable to leave, lack of trust and low self-esteem, difficulty identifying and asserting yourself because you don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. So, I'm just going to keep it to myself, because if I bring it up, it's just going to cause a fight. Problem with intimacy and boundaries, difficulty making decisions because it's all about the other person. Now, codependency in, let's say, addiction, if your partner has either a mental health challenge or a substance use disorder, that the person who is codependent is going to be trying to change the other person, trying to fix the other person. So if my partner had alcoholism, which is really disrupting the relationship, I'm going to be really angry and I'm going to try to fix it, but I'm focusing on fixing the other person and neglecting my own needs. It's going to end up in yelling and screaming and fighting and all kinds of unhealthy relationship behavior. But my focus isn't me staying healthy. My focus is fixing and changing the other person. And that's kind of like that enabler in that unhealthy relationship with addiction. All right, now let's get to some healthy relationships. I've been talking about a lot of negative things here. So communication, trust, boundaries, and consent. So in a healthy relationship, we want to really concentrate on the assertive, which is the middle column here, that we are sincere and clear and open and direct and firm. We express our needs directly. We don't beat around the bush. We don't do it aggressively. So on the left side, the passive, relationship or passive communication, that's apologizing, giving kind of qualifiers. Well, I'm just saying, maybe if, we could kind of work together sometimes. I'm thinking maybe you're kind of wanting to work together, but you're scared to say it. You're kind of passive. So you're bringing it up, but you're kind of dismissing your real true thoughts and values and putting these disqualifiers, which means, I was thinking maybe instead of, what we need to do is talk to each other more respectfully. How could we do that? Being more assertive and direct. Being nervous and quiet. So those are some passive behaviors in a relationship. Now we can go to the other extreme end, which is the aggressive, which now we are going to be condescending and harsh. We're going to be blaming and evaluating. We're going to be threats and put downs. So if we can't have a healthy communication, I'm going to say, listen, you never listen to me. And that is that aggression, trying to get them to listen. Now, if I was passive, I would be like, I don't think you listen to me very much. And maybe it's because, I talk too much. That's that disqualifier. Instead of saying, listen, if we don't have equal time sharing our thoughts, we're not going to be able to hear each other's point of view. And that would be that assertive middle column. So we have to know that. And what's not in this slide is passive aggressive. Passive aggressive communication is when your words don't match your behavior or the meaning behind your words. Like if I was going to tell Tony, I can't really see Tony, but if I say, hey, Tony, nice shirt. Does anybody in the room think I really think Tony has a nice shirt on? Because of the way oh, nice shirt. My words didn't match the meaning behind it. It's passive aggressive.
And yet I'm going to always take it as a compliment.
Thank you. So passive aggressive is where you want to really hurt the other person, but you don't want to do it directly and aggressively. So you're going to make a sarcasm. You're going to make a little joke. You're going to kind of be a little passive about it, but you really want to kind of, it's like a paper cut. You want to hurt them, but you don't want to punch them in the mouth, but you want them to feel bad. And that's passive aggressive communication. So healthy communication or assertive communication, that is when we are going to use I messages. Describe in an I message, for the people who aren't familiar with them, that is, I feel, when, you, because. And I'll have a couple examples in the next slide. So describe in specific, clear terms what you need. Don't minimize it or placate it. You're going to just say, listen, I'm not getting my needs met, and this is what I need. You've got to be clear and direct. Your body language and tone. So to be assertive is head up, chin up, shoulders back, look them straight in the eyes and say, listen, I am not getting my needs met. We have a problem and we need to talk about it. You don't put your head down and say, we have a problem, and that's passive, and we got a problem, and that's aggressive. Or, oh, sure, there's no problem at all. Our relationship is perfect. Which one is that? Which communication style is that? Oh, fine. Yeah, nothing's wrong.
Anyone have a guess? I want to write it in the chat.
Passive aggressive.
Yes. My words aren't matching the meaning behind it. All right, so be open to compromise and negotiation. And these are some direct, assertive questions. I would like your help with the housework. I would like your help with, getting ready for this party. That's really direct. You can help by, getting the chairs and the table set up. Be specific and direct. What I need to hear is, and then all these open one-liners that is just very direct, very objective, no emotional, What I need is you to help me. I can't believe it. You never helped me. And now we're getting into that unhealthy communication of aggression or passive aggressive. All right, so behaviors that cultivate trust, right? We need boundaries. I need to trust that you will, abide and respect my boundaries. We need to be reliable in a relationship. Like if you say you're going to be there at 6, to be there at 6. And if you're going to be late, to call me and you're going to be late. We need to be accountable and don't go off in that blame. So when we do a mistake, don't try to find something that the other person contributed to that mistake. And integrity. You're right, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, right? Don't compromise any core values, even if somebody's not watching. And non-judgmental in a relationship. And that's really hard because what I learned in relationships is when you meet somebody, and I'm going to meet Adrienne, say, hi, Adrienne, my name is Joe. And in that interaction, there's actually 6 people meeting in that interaction. And let me explain the 6 people. Me and Adrienne saying hi to each other, there's 6 people there. It's who I think I am, who I want to think I am, and who I actually am. And Adrienne's perception is who Adrienne is, who Adrienne wants me to think she is, and who Adrienne really is. So there's 3 people in that interaction. Interesting. It's who I think I am, who I want her to think I am, and who I actually am. Because when we meet somebody, are we really authentic? Are we really ourselves, or are we putting on a role? Are we putting on a mask to make them think something about us that we would like to think about us, but it's really not true? So we really need to be non-judgmental when people are behaving, because there's a lot going on in a relationship when 2 people start talking and meeting each other. So our boundaries. Guidelines, rules, limits that create these reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave around you. So boundaries, that bottom quote in the bottom right-hand corner, what we accept, we teach. And I love that quote. What we accept, we teach. So if we don't tell somebody that when they cross the boundary, how it affected us and that you needed to stop, we just taught them that they can cross that boundary. So if I can never finish my sentence because my partner always stops me and talks over me, if I just stop talking and let her talk over me, I just taught her that it's okay to talk over me. But now, if I was going to have a boundary, I would say, excuse me, I feel confused when you don't let me finish my sentences, because it seems like we're not going to understand each other's points of view. I need to let them know with an I message that that boundary is crossed. Boundaries can be physical, whether you like somebody having their arm around you or touching you, or how close they stand next to you. So we have physical boundaries that we need to articulate and tell somebody about it. Emotional boundaries and intellectual boundaries. So anytime somebody crosses that, we need to say, when this happens, I feel uncomfortable because, and then explain your reasons why that is happening, why you feel that way. So we do that by assertive language and explaining the consequences and outcome when somebody does step outside the boundaries. Which this is a nice negotiation worksheet. So in a relationship, if you have a problem, you need to state that problem objectively. I have a problem because I end up doing all of the housework. How it impacts the child or the relationship. This was from a parenting workshop I did. So how it impacts the relationship? It impacts the relationship because I am doing all the work and I don't have time for any me time, or I don't have time to study my homework. I don't have time to do what I need to do. And then putting that I statement together. You know, I feel overwhelmed when I do all the housework because I don't have time to study my classes. And then those open-ended questions. What I'd like is an equal amount of housework split, or can we agree on dividing the housework, or how could we prevent this from interfering with my studies? So whatever the problem is, we need to identify it objectively. And for when the youth are watching, when I say objectively is just the facts. Subjectively is your point of view or your perception. So if I was explaining this objectively, this is glass, it's probably 6 inches tall, it's hard, it's straight and round. That's an objective description of this glass. Now, subjectively is it's ugly, it's small. Ugly and small, that's a subjective point of view. That is my thought of what is ugly, what is small, what is big. So when you're saying objectively, you want to talk about the problem as it is. Not you're lazy, but when you don't pick up your clothes. That's objective. It impacts the house because when you don't pick up your clothes, it makes the house cluttered. And that's the way we kind of have this negotiation or address challenges in a relationship. All right, before we get to the consent here, I'm just going to take a temperature out here. How's everybody doing? Any comments, concerns, interest, statements? So we all handle challenges in our relationships pretty healthy. So.
I've discovered I'm a terrible communicator.
Okay, why would you discover that? What is that?
I don't know. I just feel like I get really emotional when talking with my husband. So I'm very reactive instead of proactive. And that tends to make things a lot worse. And if I just said what I wanted, like I just expect him to know what I want.
Of course. Well, thank you.
You should just know to pick up your clothes. You should just know that. Like, why should I have to tell you that?
Yes. Well, thank you for being so honest and sharing that, because I bet a lot of people have that. When we're in a relationship, we're emotionally attached, right? And love and hate is so like synonymous almost. You love somebody, so when they do something to hurt you or to not meet your expectations, our emotions get really escalated. So we're like, how could you do that? You know, I don't like that. And when we throw that emotional level of the description on there, what's going to happen? That person is going to blame you for blowing things out of proportion.
That's exactly what happens.
Okay. And then you defend yourself and tell the reason why you're so emotional, and then it just goes back and forth. So
sometimes people can precipitate what their expectations are because of how conversations have gone in the past too. So I've noticed that is, if they've not gone well in the past or it's not been heard in the past, sometimes people get emotional and are unable to communicate that kind of thing because of that. Just a thought.
no, right on.
Don't get together the less you listen to, because I've come to discover that there's certain scripts. When the topic, I would have scripts filed away, and I really knew where the conversation was going. So whenever if it ever diverged, I might never even hear it. So it impacts your it impacted my ability to listen, because if you're together long enough, everything has come up already. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I just had scripts filed away, and I guess so did the other person involved. So, and we had to come to some awareness about that, but it requires two people. So one person being aware really doesn't help.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, it's all about learning how to do better next time at the end of the day. So
it is. I used to have a girlfriend that used to always say that, well, I said, you should have said this. You should have responded this way. And I used to always say, oh my God, why don't you write me a script then? Write me a script. I don't know how to answer you. And we used to always fight until we could kind of just manage those emotional feelings and stuff, manage those and kind of express what is going on. It seems like you're really annoyed on the way I responded. I apologize. Let's find a way that we can share each other's points of view. And let me give you a real one that I did with my in a relationship. She talks for like 3 minutes. I get like a 15-second rebuttal in there, and then she talks for another 3 minutes. And I get a little 15-second rebuttal, and I'm like, and I finally kind of pull away from the relationship. And I finally started using this. And I use this iMessage that I'm going to share. I said, I feel frustrated when we're not able to tell our whole story and we get our stories cut off, because it seems like we're not going to understand each other's points of view. So then I did the I feel when, because. So now it's like, can we find a way so we can make sure that we hear each other's points of view? So we talked about putting a timer. You talk 1 minute, I'll talk 1 minute. And then I was like, how about this? How about if you're going off too long, we'll use a timeout symbol. So if I'm feeling annoyed by the conversation and I can't get a word in edgewise, I'm just going to go like this. And then you have to stop immediately in mid-sentence. And if I'm annoying you with my response going on too long, you put the timeout signal and I'll stop immediately in mid-sentence. And then we can kind of regroup and share.
That's one of the beauties of relationship therapy. I mean, as you have a referee.
Yeah. And when we don't have a referee, we need to referee ourselves. And
absolutely, that's easier said than done, because we're talking about this topic as if everybody's being logical.
Yes.
But there are all kinds of, for lack of a better word, crazy that goes into it, personality traits, disorders, and all kinds of other things to one degree or another that prevents logic and reason from prevailing.
I totally agree with that. I had two parents on the phone one day that obviously don't get along with each other. And I told the mom that we need to listen to each other and for the child's sake, and she was having none of it. She wanted to say, and she kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. I kept saying, we're not being productive. How do we move forward? Well, he did this 3 weeks ago and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, it was so awful. So yeah, there's not always, calmer heads there.
Yeah. When somebody is really emotionally venting like that, like the description you just said about that parent, reflective listening is such a great skill to say, wow, I can see this is really hurting you. I can see you're really angry about this. And that will because we just want to be heard. So when you use that reflective listening, they will say, yes, I am. And then you use that open-ended question. All right, well, let's slow down and let's look for a way that we can understand each other or get our points of view across. Right. So use that reflective listening to let them know that you feel how overwhelming or hard or hurtful or angry they are. And then an open-ended question on how could we, where can we go from here? How can we solve this? What are some of our options? And what I did skip in this, because we're out of time, there's a consent video here. about nobody has permission to touch you without your permission. So consent, both partners have to agree. It's not a free pass, even if you are sexually active, but you don't want to be sexually active tonight, then no means no. So this video on consent is simple as T. We don't have time to watch it right now, unless you guys got an extra 3 minutes to watch it.
3 minutes.
I got
Yeah,
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear it?
No.
No.
Okay, hold on. Oh, I don't have the that ability. Hold on. Oh, here it is. I found it. Okay.
Still struggling with consent.
Yes.
Just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea.
Uh-oh. Oops. Let me catch up. Sorry about that.
If you're drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
That was excellent. I love that.
Simple, easy. All right, so the opposite of that power and control one is this equality, nonviolence, non-threatening behavior, respect, trust, honesty, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, economic partnership. negotiation and fairness. All right, folks, I thank you for your time and your contributions. It's always valuable to hear, people add in some different perspectives and some stories, so I appreciate that. How's everybody doing out there? Any questions, insights, comments?
It's great. I really enjoyed it just
For the
to hear the
presentation.
different perspectives.
I
Great,
really
thank
like
you.
the video. Somebody said best video explanation ever. Thank you
Oh,
very
yeah.
much. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering how the youth will take that video, if they'll giggle through the whole thing, and because it is a very humorous video, but it is very serious topic.
Yep, yes, it is. Anyway, everybody have a good afternoon, evening, okay? Take care, be safe.
You also, Alan, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Yes, thank
Well,
you.
If no one else has any questions, we're going to wrap this up for today. Thank you, Joe and Adrienne. It was an excellent presentation. Excellent presentation.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, that's all we have for today. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us on our social emotional workshop series. Today, our topic was domestic violence and healthy relationships and what they look like. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.